Good evening, folks. How are you? I'm Sean the Fort Shop Forker. Tonight, you're here with the Sasquatch Experience. Sean Forker, James Baker, Henry May. Vance Nesbitt, Matt is out tonight. And here we go. We're going to kick off with the video, and we'll be right back.
The views and opinions expressed by the guests of Sasquatch Experience do not necessarily reflect the opinion of the hosts, sponsors, or affiliates of the Sasquatch Experience. As always, listener discretion is advised.
911, what are you reporting?
We got someone or something crawling around out here.
Does a legend walk among us, lurking in the forests of our world?
Did you see what it was? Was it a person or an animal or?
I can't tell. All I know is that my central light came on and I just happened to glimpse and see this thing running across the yard. A good-sized man or something. It looks like a man. I don't know what it was.
For over 15 years, we've talked with scientists, researchers, investigators, and witnesses, trying to gain insight and proof around the existence of this mysterious entity.
Jesus Christ, you better... Tia!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh. Okay, hang on.
He's right...
Is he in your yard, sir?
Yeah, God, he's big.
Okay, what's he doing in your yard?
He's looking at me.
Join us as we continue into the investigation of the Sasquatch Experience. And good evening, everyone. Once again, welcome to the Sasquatch Experience. Sean Forker, James Baker, Henry May, and Vance Nesbitt. Matt Arner out tonight under the weather, and we wish Matt just all the best and feeling better. He's got a rough one out there the next few days, so we just want him to get better, and we're thinking of you, buddy. Get better soon. Somewhere along the line, we have Vance Nesbitt. There he is, co-host, the announcer. Guys, we had a great show last week. And we're going to continue the discussions this week. This week's episode, Stalked by Sasquatch. We're going to talk about some interesting stories and accounts that we've pulled from either cases I've investigated or some stories we found online to talk about. And there's also a video that Matt wanted to play that I think we're going to go ahead and play. And I don't know if it'll get us in any hot water with copyrights, but I'll be damned, we're going to do it anyhow.
Ooh-hoo.
So, gentlemen, how are you tonight? Baker, we'll start with you, then Henry, then Vance.
I'm good. Been a solid week.
Solid's always good. You know, it's better than a liquid, and with you, definitely better than a gas. So,
Well, my ass does make all three forms.
how about it? Henry, how you doing over there, bud?
I'm doing well, and we are digging out from all the snow and ice that we had, and we are our snow is melting actually, even as we speak. The temperatures have gotten above freezing, so
Well, that's a plus.
we're doing much better with that. The roads are clear and everything, so everybody's able to get out and about.
Well, Henry, you live down in Mississippi. People that may not know this, you know, it's a different situation when you get the winter precipitation down there. You're not quite as prepared for it as us Yankees are up here, you know.
Right.
And when you get it, it's a little bit more difficult. So glad you're doing well down there, buddy. And Vance, how are you doing tonight?
Wow, this is like Sasquatch weather talk.
How about it? Squatch
It's
weather.
rainy. We're supposed to get about a quarter-inch of ice. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, other than that, precipitation striking us, it looks like the week's not going to be any different. But, you know, the good thing is you have us to keep you entertained for at least an hour, and our whole plethora of archives. If you go to SasquatchExperience.com, you can go right down the list, right on the main page, and listen to every episode we've had since the relaunch. And we've got a few classics mixed in there in between. So
And
got
we
some
are
good
on
stuff for you.
YouTube. We are on YouTube.
Yeah, we are on YouTube, Sasquatch Experience. I finally got it switched over, so you don't have to put a string of numbers afterwards. It's just Sasquatch Experience.
Yay.
Any comments, questions, or concerns about that one?
No.
No. Well, folks, we are going to push some merchandise on you. We have the Sasquatch Experience Special Edition Yeti mugs. They're $75, including shipping. If you go to SasquatchExperience.com and click on the Pro Shop, you can order yours. The co-hosts are starting to get them. Matt posted his today. They look pretty nice, gentlemen. I can't wait till you get yours.
Looking forward to it.
All right. We got our shirts available. We got our T-shirts available as well. And I got a top-notch local vendor here that's going to provide a nice print that we're going to take to the conferences we'll be at over the next couple months. We're going to be at Bill Rigby's conference at the end of the month, or at the end of March. Then we're going to the Ohio Bigfoot Conference, then Small Town Monsters Fest. We got a lot going on, guys. We're going to be highly mobile, highly engaged, and looking forward to the being out there and being with all our listeners in person. The Small Town
meeting all of you.
Monsters, yeah, the Small Town Monsters Kickstarter starts on February 1st. We have a commercial we'll play in a little bit, but this week they're starting to announce the perks of the rewards for the different levels. So go to Small Town Monsters on Facebook, check them out. You can go to the Kickstarter website or app and search Small Town Monsters and click notify so you don't miss the opportunity to support their great efforts. Big year for them coming up this year. And finally, before we get into the meat and potatoes of the show, you guys can become a Patreon or Spreaker supporter for as little as $2 a month. $2 a month gets you mostly ad-free shows, but also gives you a good time. We got a lot of great stuff planned for our supporters this year. We're really excited to get going. Guys, tonight, Stalked by a Sasquatch. There's a lot of behaviors out there, right, that we can attribute to Bigfoot. And, I think the frightening aspect, though, of it for me is that feeling of being watched or feeling of being followed when you're in the woods and not having a rational explanation for it, not being able to turn around and see what's around you, so on and so forth. And so that kind of was the premise for this episode. It wasn't to elicit fear, to make it seem like a horror movie, serial killer Bigfoot, but to really start getting some emphasis on the behaviors that people are noticing. And the stalking behavior is not unusual.
Mm-hmm.
And did you guys have any thoughts on it? Go ahead, Henry. What's your thoughts on the whole stalking situation?
Well, I've read so many accounts of individuals who've been in the woods and they don't necessarily see anything, but they hear something off to the side paralleling them. It sounds like it's walking on 2 feet.
So my thing with the stalking is as much as you have to look at it at the angle of what is the Sasquatch getting out of it? I mean, are you a food source? Is he interested? Are you in his territory or her? Yeah. Use whatever pronoun works with you. But the thing is like that's where I have the thing, because like I'm not talking about a habituation or blah blah blah. I'm talking about just I'm in the woods working on my greenhouse, okay, and I hear a noise. Whatever that thing is, what value is staring at me or watching what I'm doing? Am I threatening them, or do they more curious, or am I a food source? And that's where I think we have to look at is that, if these things are continually happening in one area, then maybe we should not be there because we're bothering something.
The only thing
I always kind of took it as, you're in my living room, you need to leave my living room.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know, because here's the thing with my thought of them thinking of us as a food source. All right.
I'm a big food.
There would be more reports of violent activity if that was the case. And I think there would be a lot more missing people if that was also the case. Now,
and that's accurate. I mean,
so one of the hardest parts about doing this show was deciphering the creepypastas from the legitimately reported accounts. You know, the more sensational the story, the more incredible it is, the more people tune in, which is why even kind of titling the show, I had a little trepidation because I didn't want it to be, you want it to be attention grabbing, but you don't want it to be offensive and you don't want it to be kitsch. You know, you want it to be true to form. You know, and there's shows out there that, you know, Sasquatch Chronicles and others that do a very good job chronicling some of these really scary situations. But how do we blend the world of research and these stories of fright and concern to, you know, something a little bit more relevant to what we do? And it's hard because you don't want to minimize someone's experience, right? You don't want to,
No, of course not.
you know, take away from their emotional reaction to all this. And it's easy to write that off and say, man, this is so sensational. It has to be fake. Sometimes a real sensational story is a real sensational story. And I think there's some merit. You just have to have good blinders. And does the rest of the story make sense? So when I was doing this and looking at some of these, I don't know if it was a complete success, but there's definitely it was hard, I guess, is my point, to put myself in the shoes of the people that experience it, but then also want to be able to have some sort of discernment as to if these events really took place.
Well, I think that when you say that, that's accurate, and not to go over the point I already made is I think a lot of these experiences you have to look at the individual, and you also have to look at how the story melds, because a lot of times when someone's either making something up or truly believes it without any real happening, the story changes and they get more frightened or angry when you talk to them. Oh, no, it didn't come through the back door. It always comes through the front door. Okay, well, and you ask a question like, okay, so your house faces this way. How far from the or was this 700? Like I can understand basic mistakes. Like if I explained to you what I did yesterday, I could give you. But then if you asked me for the story again, I would fill in little fillers that I remembered as I told the story the first time.
Sure.
But when you question me, and this is where maybe Matt would come in. When you question me, my core story doesn't change, and I'm not afraid to tell you what I think. Because if I'm making it up, then I have to go back in the back of my head going, okay, it's got to still sound plausible, but I can't see nuts, so I got to find the happy medium, compared to I had cheese yesterday, Okay.
Yeah, I think there's always a little bit of embellishing you want to put in the story to make it entertaining, and you want people to stay captivated and pay attention. Baker, Laura's always correcting me when I'm telling a story. She's like, "What doesn't happen that?" I'm telling the story. Shut up. Let me.
You do that. You do that to me too.
Yeah, like listen, it's a little bit more interesting when you tell it this way. It's not a lie; it's just embellished.
Right.
We were down south. We were in Tennessee. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, be specific. It's the details that people are listening for in the story. That's why you want to put as many details in without being droll and boring. But you want to be able to craft a tale out of it. I mean, you could take you have a habit of kind of giving cliff notes. I have a habit of,
filling in the
adding
blank.
the meat and potatoes, right? Which is not always a bad thing. But so let's take, for instance, guys, in the fall of 2007, I got an email from a lady in a local town. Not the same town I live in, but pretty close by. This is really when I just started the research solo. When I started going out with the PA Bigfoot Society, I kind of had credentials. Do you know what I mean? And the incident took place in September of that year. And while this lady was out riding her bike on a road, both sides of the road, it's wooded. And she does this quite often. So this isn't a new activity for our witness. Nor is this location this type of location uncommon in our county. Baker, you and I can go down many roads in this area, and they're completely wood covered on both sides. In fact, if you didn't have a mailbox, half the time you wouldn't know somebody lived behind them or in those woods.
Yep. And if it was at night, you'd miss the dirt road.
Right. And as she was riding her bicycle, she couldn't escape the feeling of being followed by something, and it really bothered her. And it wasn't something she had when she's like I told you, she did this many times. It's not something she experienced before while riding her bike. Now, the interesting thing about this is on the right side of the road, down, there's the road, kind of the guardrail. Underneath that is a little lower plateau area. So the road drops down and it's flat, and you still have those wooded tree lines on the sides. And she felt like there was something, really paying attention to her on that side of the tree lines. Now, as she's going, she feels like this thing's still following her. She's being paralleled by it at one point. In fact, she said to me, as she slowed to stop, she could hear movement in the tree line just out of sight. She kept turning her head to see if someone was following, but there was nothing in her field of view. And as she notates, the right side of the road had the drop off and more decent cover. As she's going on, a rock was tossed out of the woods. And it landed not far off from where she was riding her bicycle. Well, that kind of put her in mode, and she starts taking off, and then she could hear something moving through the tree line, kind of paralleling her. And it followed her until she's like, well, I don't want this thing to follow me home. So she kind of stops and beelines it and takes another trail. Really scared the hell out of this lady. As she experienced this, she became more fearful. She pedaled on. She finally got home. She didn't feel like anything followed her home. Not long after that incident happened, something had taken the garbage can from her property, moved the garbage can down towards the end of her property, and took the garbage out of her garbage can, but did it in a way where it was something had just taken the garbage bags and set them down and not ripped it apart, not violently
like a
tore it
raccoon.
apart. No, just moved it themselves. So cumulatively, she felt like whatever may have followed her that day maybe had followed her more than what she realized, and it did know where she lived, and decided to make itself, home to her garbage. Now, she never reported anything violent happening aside from that rock throwing. She did inevitably report some strange sounds she couldn't explain. I never found any footprints or anything in that area. But, we know that area very well, Bake, and it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility. And historically, there's been other sightings within a few miles of that lady's location. It's not in town. It's on the outskirts of town. It's actually, parts of the city we live in, guys, very rural. So, like, even though you might be postally 17701, 17701 carries a wide zip code. Just like Muncie Valley, that area really.
Kogan Station.
That zip code's quite, large.
Broad.
So sometimes, I guess that's another point. When you get these reports, you're reading them, and you're like, well, postally, this is your address, but you really got to dial in and think, well, yeah, that might sound like it's coming from the, you hear Williamsport or whatnot, you think, my God, this is right in the center of town, till you look at a map and realize, well, this is a town that's in a valley, and we're surrounded by woods, and some parts of this town are in the woods, so. It was an interesting story. It was one of the first cases. I found her to be a very sincere witness, but that bicycle riding and how it followed her, that went on for minutes. It wasn't just a quick encounter. That went on for maybe 10, 12 minutes that she was shadowed by this thing. And then the rock throwing, and that really scared her.
Yeah, to say the least.
Right. It was really interesting. Just her reaction to it, you could tell she was genuine. And it was a scary kind of behavior, especially, you're, first of all, this day and age, even back then, being a woman, I'm sure you're always more guarded than, maybe some of us are, than we're out riding our bicycles. But to, have a feeling of something. Like, she never indicated that she saw anything but just movement, like something moving.
Right.
So that was the other thing that, you really can't put your fingers on. It could have been many things. I don't know. But the rock throwing and then her garbage being moved later was just pretty fascinating to me. And we've been getting reports like that. The other thing, when I draw parallels to that behavior, I go back to, the folks, when we talked about the Cook County creature here last year. And these folks lived out in the middle of nowhere. Mr. and Mrs. A, and she had her sighting took place with, she looking down at the edge of her deck, and her dog stopped, and she's out looking, and she sees that large hair covered creature reaching in her garbage can and taking her garbage out there too. So, I start putting behaviors together. That first sighting that we talked about happened in '07. Mr. and Mrs. A happened years later. It's just interesting how even in your own research, you can start picking out some behavioral things or draw some conclusions in comparison based on other activities.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, there's only two things that can throw rocks in the woods, and it's us and Sasquatch. So you kind of
Opposable thumb.
have
I'm going to throw rocks.
the process. Right, opposable thumb, exactly, Vance. So process of elimination, it was either a human or a Sasquatch. One of the two.
Right.
I question the thumb theory because I think it's also a brain thing. Like, what's the point of a raccoon or a bear chucking a rock at you? You know what I mean? There are animals that could grasp small stones and throw them, but the mental square to, if I throw this object at something, compared to just lunging at it, and.
Well, I also think there's the thought that everything sounds larger in the woods as it's out walking around, right? Baker, we found out firsthand, like many a times what sounds like something large stomping around in the woods is a porcupine or
skunk.
a skunk or, something. So when your mind is in a place and you're putting yourself in that mental space that what you think is happening, you start convincing yourself that that's the case, and you don't start thinking about other alternatives that could be more, rational than you expect.
Right.
True.
So that was the, like it's interesting of that because that came from my own research collection, and it was the first one that I had that kind of I would call, stalking behavior. Mm-hmm. I know Matt had a video he wanted to play, and I got it queued up. We'll play that after the break. Did you guys have anything you wanted to talk about before we jump into commercials? Because we're already at that 22-minute already. Wow. Go ahead, Vance.
There is a great documentary by Small Town Monsters, which is The Hunter Becomes the Hunted. And I'm not going to give too much away in that documentary, but I encourage everybody, watchers and listeners, to watch that. There is, without giving too much information away, because I don't want to, do spoiler alerts, but it's very enthralling. But there is a portion of a witness encounter that had 3 different experiences with what is presumably a Bigfoot. But prior to his personal experience, he recalled back before all of this when he was a child. This is in West Virginia, and a school bus driver was doing the route. The bus was empty, made the first stop in West Virginia to pick up the kids. The kids were not at the stop yet. And the bus driver is a woman, and she heard these horrible noises from the wood line and saw the creature come out of the wood line and jump on top of a school bus that she's driving. Now, a school bus is 10 foot 6 inches high. I do not know the specific terrain, but to be able to jump on top of a school bus, she freaked. She lost it. She freaked. She hit the gas. She left that bus stop. There were no kids at the stop yet. And she drove directly back to the school bus depot and quit her job immediately because she didn't know if this creature was still on top of the school bus or not.
Who
to
react that
The
way?
Hunter Becomes the Hunted by Small Town Monsters. You'll get a little bit more of the detail of that story. And then the individual who's telling the story was a child at the time who was going to make his way to the school bus stop. And of course, the bus isn't there, and nor was there a creature at that time. But
I posted
the hair raising.
I posted the links.
Get from something like that happening, not knowing if it's still on top of the bus. All the
Right.
thoughts going through your mind as you're heading back to the school bus depot. What's going on? That's crazy.
I posted the links for the listeners
Yeah.
so they could go check it out. I didn't
right.
put it in Twitch. I guess I'll put that link there out that way so people can see. Hey, you know what? We're everywhere. We're everywhere. I just couldn't imagine experiencing that type of situation where, you're just going about a normal thing and all of a sudden it's a bird, it's a plane, it's a Sasquatch leaping,
Right.
bounding from ground to bus. It's like there's something on the wing. There's something on the bus.
Right. Well, there has been the testimonial from a police officer in a remote area who was looking to stop these young teens from drag racing down this rural road. And so he parked in a little an off bank, whatever, in the woods so that he could keep an eye on the roadway. And as he's sitting there, this thing comes up and looks in the passenger window at him. And he lost his mind. I don't blame him. I'd lose my mind too. That's it. Game over. And he said he peeled out of there. This is a police officer. He peeled out of there and he could see this thing in the glare of the tail lights of his squad car standing there. I'm like, well, I don't know. That's being stalked by a Sasquatch.
But now that gives me questions. Why the hell didn't you get that on a camera, a dash cam or something? Why wouldn't you flip that patrol car around?
Again, you're in the moment. Who knows?
I know. It's hindsight being what it is. I understand that,
right.
but I don't know.
But that's a really good point that you bring up, Sean, because in the Hunter Becomes the Hunted by Small Town Monsters, that question is brought up. Individual witness that actually saw something was so enthralled and shocked and taken back by what he's witnessing, yet the camera is right inside the door of his house and he's on his porch. He's got a gun. He's got a camera. He can record this stuff, but you're so focused in on the situation that's happening at the time, those thoughts don't cross your mind.
Yeah, but you almost think with law enforcement, you're a little bit more adept and trained to be ready to deal with the unexpected in the moment.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, it's just crazy.
A face, 3 times bigger than yours staring at you in the passenger
Right.
window.
I mean,
I don't
again,
know. That might, all bets are off. I don't know.
But again, we talk about putting yourself in that mental space, It's
Right.
hard to discern. Go ahead, Bake. I'm sorry.
But I think that we're looking at this through a different lens because the generation we have now and the generation before with the cell phone generation and I do it, I can't help it. I bring my phone everywhere while I'm waiting on something, while I'm doing something else, I'm looking at my phone, I'm doing whatever. I'm almost created my own ADHD just with multitasking with a cell phone.
While he's doing this show.
Yeah, well, sometimes I am because sometimes we talk about something real quick and it kicks in. And I go, "Hey, I need to look at this," But like
Ninja Turtles.
No, I quit playing that like years ago. I'm in the, But either way, the point though is that with this, the way things are now with the cell phones and the iPads and all the other stuff is, a lot of people are quick to pull that sucker out and video because they want their 5 seconds of fame or they want proof that they were assaulted or demeaned or whatever. So, I mean, I could see in the near future that a lot of these sightings, if there may be more video evidence just because it's a natural reflex. Like if I can record somebody getting close to me, then I feel safer. Like
Are you allowed to do that?
Right.
Like getting misgendered at Arby's? Is that what you're talking about? It's ma'am.
boy.
All right, guys, we got to take a break. We'll be right back.
Ma'am!
We'll be right back right after these quick
Wow.
breaks. Smoke 'em if you got 'em.
The next Small Town Monsters Kickstarter launches on February 1st of 2024. Mark your calendars and join the campaign to be a part of STM history. Backing the campaign guarantees you a plethora of physical and digital rewards, including artwork, books, apparel, and early access to the next round of Small Town Monsters films, with your name in the credits. Films like On the Trail of Bigfoot, The Ancients, Lost Contact, Dogman Territory, Werewolves in the Land Between the Lakes, and the Kickstarter backer exclusive Cryptid, The Goat Man. Visit smalltownmonsters.com for more information, and be sure to follow us on your social media platform of choice for more news and sneak peeks at upcoming Kickstarter rewards. You can join the campaign anytime during the month of February, but don't delay. Once it's over, it's over. Back the campaign, choose your rewards, and be a part of this incredible journey.
News team, assemble! I love gorillas. Who doesn't want to talk to a gorilla? And then without thinking that my wife is sleeping, I just blurted out, ask it how much it can bench. Ask it how much it can bench. My wife pops up. She's like, what are you doing? I'm like, look at this, look at this. She's talking to a gorilla. And we both just got sucked into this thing, right? So long story short, she's sitting there, she's talking to this gorilla, and one day she decides to get a little kitten, little kitty cat, right? And immediately I'm thinking don't get it a cat. It's a gorilla. It's gonna twist the thing's head off, throw the body over there, play with the head for a while, sniffing it and stuff, and then later it's gonna walk over, set the head down next to the body and wonder why the whole thing's not getting up again. Because it's a fucking gorilla.
Ah, yes, the gentle, subtle sounds of Bill Burr. This is the Bigfoot Bullhorn exclusively right here on the Sasquatch Experience, and I hope you're having a wonderful frozen Monday night. Speaking of Greta Thunberg,
how dare you!
An ancient species of great ape was likely driven to extinction hundreds of thousands of years ago when climate change put their favorite fruits out of reach during dry seasons, according to scientists. The species, Gigantopithecus blacki, which once lived in southern China, represents the largest great ape known to science, standing approximately 10 feet tall and weighing anywhere between 650 pounds to 1,000 pounds. But its size may have been a weakness. It's just a massive animal. It's just really, really big, said Reynold Jonas Boyu, a researcher at Australian Southern Cross University, and co-author of the study published a few weeks back in Journal Nature. When food starts to become scarce, it's so big it can't climb trees to explore for new food sources. The giant apes, which likely resembled more modern orangutans, survived for about 2 million years in the forested plains of China. They ate vegetation diets, munching on fruits and flowers in tropical forests until the environment began to change. Researchers analyzed pollen and sediment samples preserved in caves as well as fossil teeth to unravel how forests produced fewer fruits starting around 600,000 years ago as the region experienced more dry seasons. The giant apes didn't vanish quickly, though, but likely went extinct sometime between 215,000 and 295,000 years ago, due to the fact that many of these giant apes drove Ford Explorers and Humvees, changing their environment. I just made that part up. While smaller apes may have been able to climb trees to search for different food, researchers' analysis show the giant apes ate more like tree bark, reed, and other non-nutritious food. When we come back, the best tasting barbecue just might be Bigfoot.
You're listening to the Bigfoot Bullhorn right here on the Sasquatch Experience.
Do you have an annoying car? Do you have an annoying teen? Is your annoying teen eating up the dollars you need to replace your annoying car? Does it feel like you'll never get that dream car that you promised yourself when you grew up? Are you looking for a solution? Willing to try a new idea? Well, Chris's Cars for Kids could have just the answer you're looking for. Come on down to your local Chris's Cars for Kids dealership and see what's on offer. Don't forget to bring your old car. And most importantly, that spare teenager that's been cluttering up your kitchen. You bring your kid in, sign some quick paperwork, and pick out your car.
Children are not refundable. Terms and conditions apply.
And that's that. You just drive away.
From Colorado, it's Estes Park Bigfoot Days. Celebrates all things squatchy. The weekend event begins on Friday, April 19th, with our Bigfoot Barbecue, a ticketed dinner featuring celebrity guests, and concludes on Saturday, April 20th, with a free outdoor festival in Bond Park. The festival runs from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. and features appearances and talks from television Bigfoot celebrities and experts, Colorado Bigfoot stories, film screenings, live music, outdoor-themed activities for the entire family, craft and food vendors, and a Bigfoot calling contest, with much, much more. For more information, contact Estes Park Event Center at 970-586-6104. Thanks again for listening to this edition of the Bigfoot Bullhorn right here on the Sasquatch Experience. And as always, everybody,
keep your toes in the mud.
Thanks, Vance, for that that segment. Appreciate that. Keep your toes in your own mud. I don't want to be messing around with that shit. Folks, Sasquatch Experience, Sean Forker, James Baker, Henry May, and Vance Nesbitt. We've been talking about stalking Sasquatch tonight. Witnesses either being followed and chased or harassed by these creatures or jumping on school buses. So it's been an interesting show so far. Guys, I have a couple more stories that I've gotten on the web and a video that Matt wanted me to play, but I want to make sure you guys get your time in. What do you have?
Oh, I want to see the video.
Yeah, me too.
You all want to see the video? Well, it's from a TV show, so we're going to test our copyright infringements here.
That's okay.
But you know me, I'm always willing to push the.
This is not the video in which you are looking for.
What you gonna do when they come for you?
Let me get this set up because I know people say we're unprofessional when we do this. We can talk on this video too. The following events occurred in the Cascade Mountains of Oregon in balls.
Ooh.
Thoughts?
Yeah, there's thoughts. You know, there's a couple of ideas and recollection that comes back to me about these creatures recognize and understand what a firearm is. I've heard that so many different times, maybe because of past encounters over years and years, that they understand that there's a boomstick and it can create death. And as soon as it saw a boomstick, it took off and ran, but wants the individual out of its territory. And again, it seems like a lot of these cases, when it's chasing you out of the territory back to the vehicle in which you got there, that's when they cease their chase, because they know that is an object that you're going to get in and you're going to vacate the area, and a mission is accomplished. So those are my two big takeaways from that type of story.
Go ahead, Henry.
Well, one takeaway I have is they never called it a Sasquatch or Bigfoot. They just said it was a dark figure. They said it was some sort of a creature of some sort, but never said it was a Sasquatch.
True.
Even he didn't say it was a Sasquatch.
Well, he said dark, hairy figure.
Yeah, that's still, go ahead. Yeah.
Still an
It can still be
interesting
inferred.
take, yeah.
It is, absolutely.
That's a crap your underwear moment.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. There seems to be some sincerity in the story he's telling. He's, again, you have to realize that he's probably in a room telling his story. Meanwhile, there's a production team out there creating this,
Drama.
the drama around behind it. So, we're getting and this is what I was talking about at the beginning of the show. Like when you see it presented in this form, it becomes a lot more creepypasta-ish as opposed to a legitimate encounter.
Right.
Because that's how it's presented. It doesn't have to be, and Baker, you made a good point there in the chat, edited version. At that point, you're now at the mercy of a production company that's going to cut up your story and just lay it out
add
there.
music to it and get more dramatic. Sure, of course.
But to the end of the day, if you take that as a core story, that's a pretty scary story.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, James.
But then again, you ask the question of what is the value to him to tell that story to people? Like he used to be a police officer, I'm assessing, or and he liked to hike and stuff like that. Like, really honestly, like he's really honest about. He's like, when I wasn't fat and old, I used to walk around a lot, and at one time I saw something, and then it changed how I do things. Which maybe that's why he got fat and old, because he stopped going to the woods. But like the fact is like there's no value of him telling that story to a bunch of people because it just makes him look like, hey, did you hear Bob? Did you hear Don Knotts, the cop over there? He's got, he saw Sasquatch. Yeah.
Barney Fife saw Bigfoot out in the woods last week.
Yeah, pretty much. I couldn't think of the name. Barney Fife, yeah.
Well, he didn't take a flashlight. That was
if
his first
they were
mistake.
well, supposedly it was a beautiful, clear day. He didn't expect to be out there that long, but then he says he hiked for 2 hours. I'm assessing that it was 2 hours back to his car, unless he was making a circle. But like he had said, he'd hiked that area before, not a problem. This particular time,
Always make sure you're prepared, folks. Make sure you're prepared.
Until he pulled his compass out.
Oh, there's a train.
The train.
That's what it was. The compass set him off.
So no, the compass was interesting. I don't know. The story was, I'm sure there was a reason Matt wanted to share it. I wish he would have gave me his notes so I could have read his, process behind why that particular video. But I think it does go into some good behavioral pieces. Like you identified, it pulled the gun out on it, and it for some reason recognized that as threat behavior and left. But then why did it come back?
Probably to get the individual out of its living room.
Right. And then we go back to, stories we've heard of other places. Like we can go back. I mentioned it last week. We're going to talk about it again in the future. Hunubby, Oklahoma, that situation where they're, shooting and, potentially killing these things that are attacking the homestead, and they still keep coming back.
Right.
So, again, we talk about a learned behavior. We identify the boomstick, as you and Ash like to call it, and they know that's a bad thing. Doesn't stop them from coming back.
Right. No, I think it's taking on a different tactic. Whatever the theory is in these creatures' intelligence level on warfare, on how to deal with a situation like that, who's to say? I don't want to draw too many conclusions to other creatures that are able to communicate, defensive modes, but, crows are able to teach their young what specific items are dangerous, but how are they able to do that? And maybe Bigfoot has that ability too, to pass this knowledge down through the years that, these other bipedal creatures, they have this thing that they can pull out and it can hurt or kill.
Well, they have ways. There's forms of communication they have that we don't utilize, and then of course, with the Sasquatch, we've heard bits and snippets of their language, if that's what it truly is, from Ron Moorhead, vocalizations, whatever they mean. I'm sure that's a way for them to convey information out to somebody. And as we go back to a police officer there, he felt like he was getting set up for ambush behavior.
Right.
An ambush tactic. You talked about that thing changing tactics. Well, right then and there, he kind of felt it.
I think we have to look at it as most cryptids that we believe exist have to have a measure of intelligence. Otherwise, we'd find them like we do bear, deer, and bunnies. They'd be everywhere. You'd be able to, there'd be no, like at some point, they must have recognized that we were able to, be a threat to them, not decide to talk to us any further. Because if you look at the ancient stories, the Native Americans, some of the other ones, even the cavemen, they had pictures of things that seemed like ancient aliens or hairy creatures. And the thing is that at one point, there must have been a collective idea to say, these things are these things are overpowering or overpopulating us. We do not want to be just exterminated by it. It seems to be afraid of us now. Why don't we back away and kind of hide in the woods? Because otherwise, if it's an unintelligent creature, which I've said multiple times, then we would hit them in the streets like bear. There'd be no question of where a body was or anything else, because there has to be an intelligence somewhere to allow it to not be recognized compared to an animal that would, if I put out a half raw chicken and put a camera over it, I'm going to catch 20 animals grabbing it, and they don't care. They don't care that the camera's there. They don't care that I saw them do it. But if this creature exists, then it's intelligent.
Right.
There's
a lot to be said by that.
Right. I have another one here for us, guys. This one is from Phantoms and Monsters, January 5th, 2024. Elk hunter paralleled and stalked by possible Bigfoot near Mount St. Helens. A military veteran is back home in Washington and hunting elk near Mount St. Helens. He hears some walking in the woods, eventually realizing that at least one Bigfoot is paralleling him. And the story goes as follows. This experience happened to me after I left the military. I was hunting near Mount St. Helens, Washington. This is my first trip back, and I wanted to get in some elk hunting. I was so excited to be back home and able to go hunting, which I love. My hunting partner was not able to go with me on this trip, so I was going to make a solo trip, which I've done many times before. I knew the area well enough and was prepared for what it would present. I always take at least 3 days' worth of provisions when hunting and survival gear in the way of extra clothing, a poncho, matches, fire starter, and other essential items in my backpack. I know that many do not take such precautions when hunting, but I do because once while hunting I got turned around so bad I spent 3 days in the woods wishing I had something with me other than my gun, knife, and what I was wearing on my back. On this trip I was going to hunt a power transmission line right away. I parked on the logging road and walked about a mile to where I would sit on top of a ridge where I would be able to watch both sides. It allowed me to be able to have a clear shot for over 400 yards in either direction. I'd taken several elk in the same location in various seasons over the years before entering the service. I walked in before the light and reached the spot where I intended to hunt before the sun came up. I was there all day and did not see a thing. This was highly unusual, as every other time I had chosen this location, I always saw something. It was also more quiet than I remember for some reason. I also had the feeling of being watched, but thought it was nothing. About an hour before dark and close to when I would have to leave, I started to hear movement to the right in the woods. It was not the usual sounds you hear from an animal, more like someone walking in the woods. I thought that maybe someone else was hunting in this area. I took note to be careful and not to shoot in that direction should an elk walk out. I never saw anyone else, but kept having that feeling I was being watched. It's just a feeling I could not shake. When I got up to leave, I yelled over and said, "I'm coming out. For God's sakes, don't shoot." I said this as more of a joke. No one said anything, and there was no more movement from that direction. I once again yelled a little louder, "I'm coming up. Please don't shoot." I started walking towards the dirt road and wandered back and forth between transmission power lines. I thought it was funny that whoever it was didn't call back to say they had heard me. I got to the road and started back to my car thinking that whoever it was didn't want to make any noise to scare any animals, as it was not quite dark enough to stop hunting. But for me, I felt the urge to leave. As I moved down the road towards my car, the sound of walking in the woods started again off to my right, just inside the tree line. I thought that maybe whoever it was had decided to walk out with me. Whoever it was did not come out of the woods, but just kept paralleling me. I'd stop and they'd stop. This is beginning to creep me out, so I asked them to come out where I could see them. There is no reply. In a louder voice, I said, "Enough's enough. No more games. Get your ass out here so I can see you." Again, there was no reply. I took my gun off my shoulder and locked around into the chamber, keeping the gun pointed in the direction of the area while I heard the walking, but with my safety on. I continued to walk to my car. When I stopped, it stopped. I became worried that maybe this was not human. I began to think that maybe this might be a Bigfoot. I was also aware that there may be another one on the left side of me. I started to watch all around me. After all, I would rather be safe than sorry. I still had quite a way to go to get to my car and knew it would be dark by the time I got there. I started to jog so I could possibly get there before it was totally dark. The thing to my right started keeping pace with me. I could hear it breaking limbs and what sounded like small trees as it kept pace with me. By this time, I knew it was not a human being, and I was almost sure it was a Bigfoot. I made it to my car without ever seeing what it was, but I wasted no time in putting things away. I simply threw my things in the car and got out of there as fast as I could without ever seeing it. I can tell you it was not a bear, cougar, bobcat, or anything else that I've experienced in the woods. I cannot say for sure it was a Bigfoot. Because of an experience years previous, I'm more positive than not it was. So somewhere along the line, he had an experience before that. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty intense situation going on.
Yeah, right.
Mm-hmm.
And, as we talk about the hunters and things they experience, and we'll get into that in another episode, into more of that, because of a case I investigated in 2016 where the hunter had a visual encounter. I don't know, there's just something more about it when a hunter gets spooked. Because they are armed, they are out in a position, they're usually used to their surroundings. I don't know, guys. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, if you have a deer tree stand, I'd be putting that thing about 40 feet up in a tree instead of 6.
But I think that it goes true to what we've said a long time ago is he's out in an area where there is game. He's out there for a reason. That reconciles that the creature could be out there for a reason. They like
food.
elk too.
Mm-hmm.
They just don't use a gun, which scares me more.
Break that neck and down they go. Go ahead, Henry.
Well, it's interesting that these individuals that you were talking about, Sean, did not see what was paralleling them. Now, the lady did not make any assumptions as to what it was, but the guy said, yeah, it may have been a Sasquatch, which is interesting because, like I say, about the only other thing it might have been was another person. And who would have known that guy was going to be out there?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And, when I asked the lady way back then why she reported it to me, she just felt like there was no other explanation after she started looking around into what it could potentially be. She never had that experience with a bear. She doubted it was another person just because of how it was keeping pace with her. And again, it's the same thing that's said in that story, keeping pace. It managed to keep up with them. And on foot, that's not so terrifying. But when you're on a bicycle and it's able to keep up with you, that's a different story.
Right. Yeah, I've heard of a case, too, where a woman made this report of the same thing. She was in her car on a gravel road, so she wasn't really driving that fast on a gravel road, and this thing was paralleling her at the same speed. So again, I don't know what the point is behind that other than escorting you out of their area. That's the only thing I can see.
You would think that if it wanted to be a lot more violent, it had plenty of opportunities to do so in that stalking behavior, unless it's putting itself into position to learn before it strikes.
Well, that's a good point, too. Didn't think of it that way.
Well, we don't want to think about it that way. We don't want to think that we can become the hunted.
All right.
And, we pride ourselves as being the top of the food chain.
Right.
And we're only top of the food chain because we have, opposable thumbs, the ability to fashion weapons, and we have boomsticks.
And ovens.
And,
And ovens.
honestly, and as something evolving parallel to us that may not be as sophisticated but may have far greater strength, that's a little bit intimidating. And, back to the story you shared in the news break with Gigantopithecus dying out, first of all, we don't know that Bigfoot is Gigantopithecus.
No.
We've always had that assumption that it's within that lineage.
Right.
But there are many people that think it followed more along the lines of a Paranthropus or, not as massive as Giganto. And we don't know why Giganto died. We assume it died. But if it was convergent with the Neanderthal, they also think the Neanderthal killed it out.
Right.
Because it
and with a theory that I brought up, China and its human population is by far much older than the human population in the lower 48 states of the United States. And why would it have been only in China that Gigantopithecus would have existed? Well, why not in the lower 48?
Well, they say that
the human population wasn't nearly as expansive as it is in China at that time.
But we have to be very clear about something, Vance. We don't have full fossil of Giganto.
Right.
All we found is a partial jawbone and some teeth. We've never found anything else.
Right. Yeah, and we haven't found anything else here. But the environment may have been more suitable here in the lower 48, where all that evidence would have been consumed by the Earth.
Or other rodents.
Or sure, porcupine, whatever.
Right.
Yeah. No, understandable. Not the greatest environment for fossilization. We'll put it to you that way.
Just, we make a lot of assumptions on a creature we've only have a handful of teeth and a jawbone from. That's my point I'm trying to make.
Right. No,
well, guys, we've hit that time again. Any final thoughts from you all before we beat out for the night?
Ooh. Wow, I'm glad you used out. Holy cow. Whew, that was close. We can go on with this subject, stalked by Sasquatch, probably for hours and hours and hours on end, because this is only just a tiny sliver, the top of the iceberg of the whole subject, because there's so many stories, including personal stories that we can all, share.
And we haven't even gotten into that.
Right. So, yeah, I would like to continue with this subject matter at some point, but Sean and myself had a conversation earlier today. We got some great shows coming up in the near future that we'll be looking forward to with some great guests. So stay with us.
Stay tuned. Henry, Baker, anything else? Thank you, Steve. Thanks for tuning in tonight, buddy.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Go ahead, Bake.
Well, Henry, Bake.
Say the words, Henry. Let's get her home.
Take us out, buddy.
Y'all be good. Be good at it.
We'll see you next week, folks. Keep on squatching.
Bye, Henry.
You've been listening to Sasquatch Experience. Please rate and review where this podcast has been consumed. To share your experience, visit us on Facebook, our website, or email us, info@sasquatchexperience.com. Keep on squatching.